speaking, though, you mentioned Pittsburgh now. Let's jump AFC North. We'll go in order here. We've already kind of led in with this. Lamar Jackson, the guy who needs maybe a check down receiver here. But you look, and I spoke about this with Sam actually a little bit ago, and it's that offense that the Ravens are building right now, it's eerily similar to Greg Roman's offense that he built with the Bills. So you have a mobile quarterback that maybe needs a little bit of help with his pass catchers, Tyrod Taylor and now Lamar Jackson, a bevy of running backs, and then there's no real clear-cut number one wide receiver. The number one wide receiver that he had in Buffalo was Sammy Watkins, gets hurt, and then it's Robert Woods, and neither of them really did anything at their time in Buffalo, and then they've now exploded elsewhere. So you look at it and you see Lamar Jackson as this giant rushing threat. Is there any sort of, do we see an increase in his passing ability in year two now in the offense, or are we going to look at more of Lamar as just this running quarterback?
He's another guy, I think, if you go back to our pre-draft analysis, we nailed it as far as describing what the situation would look like. If you have Lamar Jackson on your team, how do you build an offense? You need to use him as a runner. You need to influence the defense to play more players and more defenders closer to the line of scrimmage, and just having him as a threat as a runner creates more open throws. Why does he need more? Everybody needs more open throws, but inaccurate quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson really need more open throws because
we all need
they're completed, right? Everybody does. But Lamar Jackson's skill set allows for more open throws. Okay, so he had the most open throws of any quarterback coming out because that's the way Louisville schemed it up in the play action game, and you can roll them out and do all those fun things. So I think they're building the offense the right way around him. It's also a really risky way to build an offense. It's so run heavy. I don't think he's going to be a top 20 to 25 passer in the NFL. And when you don't have that, it's risky. You're relying on the defense. You're relying on shortened games. You're relying on the things that worked for them pretty well last year. It's just tough to sustain. But they're doing the right thing with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, which is using him as a runner and trying to steal those free yards. Because he's just not a pinpoint accurate passer.
So is that the thought process, do we think, behind getting Marquis Brown, a guy nicknamed Hollywood, appropriately, this giant deep threat? And obviously he had Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray throwing the ball to him. A little bit different in terms of throwers, obviously, but there were times that Lamar hit these Louisville receivers way downfield and on beautiful throws, big-time throws. Downfield, is that kind of where the thought process was, or should they just go full run heavy?
Well, I think because they're running so much, you have to be able to stretch the field vertically. So you have that speed guy like Marquis Brown. He's more than just a deep threat too. He works the intermediate stuff pretty well. So yeah, I think that's what they're trying to do. They're going to base around the run game, Lamar in the run game, adding Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and then be able to stretch the field with a Marquis Brown.
And I just worry too, though. 7 games last year, Lamar Jackson, 147 rushing attempts. So how can you sustain that throughout the course of the season and stay healthy? So I want to see if he can stay healthy. And then number 2, though, is executing from the pocket. I think Greg Roman, that's a great addition for the offense as far as schematics, because he was with Colin Kaepernick, right, and helped him in San Fran. So I think there's some carryover he can bring for Lamar Jackson. Same type of ability maybe. But Lamar Jackson has to be a better passer from the pocket. We talk about it all the time. It's going to be those 3rd down 8 situations that, Big Ben, Baker Mayfield, those guys are going to convert. They have the arm talent, the accuracy to get it done. And can Lamar take that next step and be a better passer?
It seems like they need to figure out the second facet to that offense, where whatever it is, a screen game, something just to where Lamar doesn't have to get hit so much, right? Like right. He can't. There's no way with how big he is that this is a long-term winning strategy for the Baltimore Ravens. History has shown that you don't win in the NFL long-term like this, right?
So I do think a part of staying healthy is how you take hits and everything. I think a guy like Kaepernick, Russell Wilson, those guys are really good at avoiding big hits. Guys like Michael Vick, Robert Griffin, not so good at it. Lamar's kind of in between. He takes a few hits where you're like, come on, man, just slide or just get out of bounds. And then other plays, they just have enough speed to get to the sideline, enough speed to get out of harm's way. So I think he's got to play smart, and I think the trick is keeping him as a threat in the run game while still cutting back on his carries. So using creative plays where the defense has to account for him, but you're able to move the defense around a little bit, create horizontal stretches and then the vertical stretches with Marquis Brown. Lamar as a passer, though, he's the guy that, like, when you're watching the game, some people think he's crazy accurate, some people think he's inaccurate. If you watch the game long enough, both people are right, because he does really good things. He sits in the pocket, he goes through progressions, he can make big-time throws, and then overall, in our ball tracking, data, and how accurate he is, he's well below average in the NFL. He was below average in the draft class. So you just have to know what those limitations are and try to, again, create as many open throws as you can.
And that's what they're doing with Marquis Brown. Separation is king. Bringing in Marquis Brown over Michael Crabtree, instantly you get a better separator, a guy that can create open throws on his own against man coverage. In addition to being able to stretch the field deep, he works the intermediate field, and he's good, sneaky good after the catch. I think he adds so much more than what Michael Crabtree could add late in his career, specifically creating more open throws against multiple coverages.
I think the interesting thing, though, about the Ravens is that this offense is going to look different than any other offense in NFL history. Like towards the end of last season, the Ravens were more run heavy than any other modern offense with what they did with quarterback position. And you can even tell that they're all in on the run-heavy approach by the backup quarterbacks. They got RG3, and they draft Trace McSorley in the 6th round. A guy who has no business seeing an NFL field as a thrower, but he runs a 4.5. I mean, he looks like a running back there. People wanted him to switch to safety or wide receiver. So they have this group of quarterbacks that is all set up on this run heavy. So one goes down, you throw in the next guy, and he still keeps running the ball.
And that's what I love about Harbaugh, though, is he's all in. And he wants to win, though, as a team.
Are you surprised by that, though? Somebody who's won a Super Bowl with a Flacco playing like the most traditional way possible to totally flip at this point in his career and say we're all in on the run game?
I mean, I love it because I think it just shows, like, coaching is more than just X's and O's. It's how to get the best out of your players and the most out of them. And I feel like with his background being a special teams guy, you can see abilities in players, to put them on different special teams units and this and that. I think Harbaugh is doing a good job, and he realizes what he has right now. So he's like, look, we're going to win this way. We're going to have a good defense, we're going to have good special teams, and we're going to control the ball on offense. And look, you have to eliminate turnovers, and you have to get turnovers. So those are the games the Ravens are going to be in this year. They can't afford to turn the football over. They can't afford to, throw interceptions and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm anxious, especially how this division lays out, of where the Ravens will seek, because I think they'll have a pretty strong defense as well.
And the Ravens, they don't have to pay $30 million to a Kirk Cousins. Like everyone else is going for all these quarterbacks, pocket passers, passing game is king. They can throw in all these guys who are glorified running backs at the quarterback position, still get a good enough offense, and then throw that $30 million at Earl Thomas on defense, adding pieces to their defense, stopping the passing game. And so it's kind of zigging while everyone else zags and tries to have this passing offense. They're going to say, we'll put it all in our passing defense, and then have this offense that can just get by and give us average, but think that's still winning football.
So I think the defense, though, is one of the most fascinating stories here, because we spent the whole offseason debating what's more important, pass rush versus coverage in a vacuum, and the Ravens, if anything, went with us and said, focus on the back end, focus on coverage. So Terrell Suggs is gone, Zadarius Smith is gone, their best pass rushers. They've got unproven guys like Tim Williams, Matt Judon. They don't have great pass rushers, but they might have the best secondary in the NFL with Jimmy Smith, Brandon Carr, adding Earl Thomas, Marlon Humphrey's one of the best young corners, Tavon Young. I mean, they've got all of these corners, so they're going to be a fascinating test case where the back seven, or especially the secondary, is great. The pass rush might be one of the worst.
That's what Sam and I did talk about that. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Tony Jefferson as well in the secondary.
Of course. Because Tony watches. He'll be watching.
Exactly. Yes, Tony. Sorry.
The last one I want to get there is, you mentioned zigging while everybody zags. Mm-hmm. So Ronnie Stanley has developed as this sort of traditional becoming one of the great pass blocking left tackles in football, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're going to flip everything and force him to be this hand in the ground, run all the time guy. Is that dumb? Will they end up having to let Ronnie Stanley go, or how far do you go all in on this thing?
I mean, I could foresee them not valuing him once his next contract comes up. But I mean, I think he's no slouch in the running game and stuff. Yeah, he still can run. Right. He still can run block. It's not like he's bereft of that whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So I do think, while you're not maximizing his talents necessarily, I still think they're taking advantage of the fact that they have.
If they do stick with Lamar, though, and some other team that's the Chargers and Phillip Rivers or something, and somebody that's dropping back a lot more than the Ravens are, maybe you've got good trade value there. If they do stick with Lamar in this run first system over the next couple of years.
They have Marshall Yanda always to lean on as well there. They do have a question mark at left guard, which will likely be answered in training camp. There's a 3 or 4 person position battle there. Transitioning though now, another team that actually does have position battles likely going to see, it's the Bengals. Jonah Williams goes down. They spend the high draft pick on him. They had shifted Cordy Glenn inside to left guard, let Jonah play left tackle. Now, in all likelihood, they have to shift Cordy back out and then play, it's either Clint Bowling, Alex Redmond, John Miller, who they got, Christian Westerman, Michael Jordan. There's a bevy of guys that can handle that spot. Clint Bowling was there last year, but did not do very well. So I think it's obviously a huge blow to Zac Taylor in his first year to lose your first round pick even before training camp starts. So it's Andy Dalton in the, do we see Jeff Driscoll at all after what he did last year? Highly doubtful. But, you have guys opposite their offensive line. Tyler Boyd came on strong last year, and the year that he had, the 9-game stretch with Tyler Boyd and AJ Green in the offense, I'm not sure if there was a better duo that kind of emerged from last year's season. So Dalton has the weapons this year. It's just what Zac Taylor can do with Dalton, I think, going forward.
Well, it's interesting because the Bengals offense, you look at it on paper, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, obviously John Ross, whatever they get out of him, very similarly built to where Zac Taylor comes from in the Rams in terms of Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Boyd being Kupp, Green being Woods, and Ross being Cooks in that sort of analogy there. I think they have a very similar talent as both.
And even like quarterback-wise too.
And very similar sort of facilitator. So got a lot of good results for it. With the Rams, don't have necessarily the offensive line in Cincinnati, but they have the pieces on the outside to execute that offense.
And it's some of the best offenses or the best seasons that I've ever seen Andy Dalton have come when he has that great number 2, which has always moved on for him. Marvin Jones Jr. was there, which gave him a little help opposite AJ, and then it was Mohamed Sanu who gave some good minutes opposite AJ. But all those guys would always leave the building, and then it seemed like in that year when they were gone, it was just AJ. Obviously, when AJ gets hurt, forget about it. But it seems like Boyd is becoming that next Jones Jr. Sanu. Is that fair to say? Or is he better than those guys?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think his stretch last year was fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I always go back to Dalton's 2015 season, which is not just Marvin Jones, but it was Jones and Sanu and the best of Tyler Eifert. When you do surround Dalton, who's a mid-tier quarterback, like many of the NFL quarterbacks, you surround them with great weapons, you can get really good results. And I think that's what the Bengals have always, tried to achieve around Andy Dalton. And it's been tough the last couple of years because, like you said, they lost a couple of receivers. Boyd came on late, and then the offensive line has been pretty bad over the last couple of years. So I think the interesting story here is Zac Taylor, because everybody wanted anybody who'd ever had a beer with Sean McVay, right? They're all getting hired.
Right.
And Zac Taylor is one of those guys, and the thing that McVay did was take this St. Louis Rams offense, or Los Angeles Rams, in 2016 and say, okay, this is one of the worst offenses in NFL history, and then they turned it into a very good offense, both schematically, hiding offensive line deficiencies, all that stuff. Because on paper, the Bengals look okay at receiver, but we still don't know what John Ross is, and the offensive line is still one of the worst in the NFL. So can a Sean McVay guy scheme out of this? Can you scheme and hide Bobby Hart at right tackle, and can you get the most out of these guys? I want to see if the Bengals can overachieve with what we see on paper offensively with the scheme.
And I think, too, with that play-action pass game, and the screens that come off of it, that could help the offensive line, tremendously. And, look, I was there with A.J. Green, Mohamed Sanu, and Marvin Jones. And those dudes were talented, young guys that are hungry, awesome guys to work with and be around that just love the game. And so it was sad that you can't keep everyone in that building, but you're right, like it's nice to see they do have some pieces outside for them, but how they come together as far as a young coach handling this team in a tough division, so that's what's going to be interesting for me to see.
Would you give Ryan Finley snaps this season?
I'm definitely pushing him. I liked Ryan Finley coming out. I just think, not that he has the biggest arm, but he's ready to execute an NFL offense now because he has the timing of footwork down. He was accurate. I felt like he was smooth, so I feel like he could pick up this offense. I think you're all in with Andy Dalton now. I think it's a sense of urgency for Ryan Finley to learn this offense and be ready to go. But I think Andy Dalton hasn't had a ton of, injury-prone seasons. So, and I think Andy's definitely capable enough to come back and have a strong year. And I'd like to see him be all in with him this year and see where that leads. And because like you said, if you have the pieces around him, and Andy can execute the offense, he's smart enough to do that. But he also has to take that next step, being this point in his career of being, he led the Bengals to 3 straight years of the playoffs when they haven't been for a while. And then, but it's like, but is that all we're going to get from them? So I think this year is huge for Andy as far as that's concerned.
But if you're sitting there at 2-10,
absolutely,
yeah, right. you have an idea. I think you know what Andy Dalton is at this point in his career. And again, not to disparage some very good quarterbacks in the world, but a lot of NFL quarterbacks are just in that middle tier where if you give them the best supporting cast, they'll put up good numbers. You give them a poor supporting cast, it's going to be ugly. I think Dalton's there. You know that's what he is. Let's figure out what Finley is.
That's just what I need to do. Blame it on my supporting cast.
Always.
It always works.
That's why
It
I
works.
don't win many games.
Bruce, you should write my leads here to the next team as well, because you talk about supporting cast, all in. Browns are next. They're all in with Baker. They're building around him. They have two dudes that have played together before, reuniting OBJ and Jarvis Landry. How much more do we like the Browns this year than we liked them last year with Baker?
Well, they're paper Super Bowl champs right now, right?
Yeah, I mean,
they're
almost overrated at this point,
Yeah, right.
which is crazy because the AFC North, I think, is going to be competitive and tough, and the AFC in general. But you expect, I mean, Baker, I think, could put up an MVP caliber season.
Agreed.
Throwing to those guys, the offensive line, I think, is a bigger question mark than it was a year ago at this time. And they added a lot of pieces to the defense, but it's a whole new system, new coordinator, so you don't know exactly what you're going to get there. And they're still kind of weak. There's still question marks at corner opposite Denzel Ward. So it's the questions are in some serious places when you talk about O-line and the secondary.
Yeah, so they got Greedy Williams. Does he battle Terrence Mitchell for the cornerback 2 spot? Is that what we're looking at for Cleveland?
Yeah, the question with Greedy, though, is, he fell for a reason, right? He's a top 10 talent that fell to the second round because people questioned his desire to play football. Then you have, if he was going to a man, we had him as our best press man corner in the draft. If he was going to a press man scheme, I'd feel better about it, Mike.
Yeah.
But they're going to, Rod Wilkes taking over, played a ton of zone. Is that a good fit for what Greedy does? Not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, he played zone with Patrick Peterson. If you play zone with Patrick Peterson, you're going to play zone with pretty much any cornerback in the NFL, because that's just what his scheme is, coming from Carolina to Arizona to now here. So that's the biggest worry for me, is what that's going to look like. Is Ward, Greedy, those two man corners, like, they want to play man coverage. They should be playing man coverage, but will they? Remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the opposite of what Harbaugh's doing in Baltimore with the offense, like completely committing to the strengths of his players. Lamar Jackson buying in on the backup quarterbacks. On the defensive side with Steve Wilkes saying we're running zone no matter what, even with PP and Greedy Williams, which you could see maybe not working out when you're not playing to the strengths, and like hiding what Patrick Peterson and Greedy Williams are best at, and maybe forcing Terrence Mitchell to play because Greedy Williams can't play Steve Wilkes' zone.
But if you're going to do that, you're going to be able to rush the passer. Myles Garrett already ready to become a top 5 to 10 edge defender, top 5 edge defender in the NFL right now, I'd say. And you add Olivier Vernon, add Sheldon Richardson. So they added to one of their major weaknesses, where it was really just Myles Garrett, Larry Ogunjobi last year playing a million snaps. They actually have guys that can get after the quarterback. So they've gone after it, like you said, Cam.
Have to.
So-
Have to be all
What about
in.
not getting the Gerald McCoy deal done? Because he was lingering around them for a while, and it seemed like there was a little bidding war. Baltimore was involved, Carolina was involved, the Browns were involved. How badly does that one hurt? Like, would that have been the final piece that would have put them over the Super Bowl hump, or is that one that they're okay losing?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think a ninth-year defensive tackle is the difference in a Super Bowl or not. I think it's more icing on the cake, because it's not. They took what I think was more of a weakness, and they already made it into a potential strength.
Before the McCoy
Before the
thing even
McCoy,
came
yeah.
up.
Like having Ogunjobi, Sheldon Richardson, Olivier Vernon, Myles Garrett as your starting four is already pretty good. They got a little bit of depth there. So McCoy, I think, would have been more icing on the cake rather than the actual cake.
I feel like the Browns are the new age Pittsburgh Steelers in this division. The Steelers had Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Big Ben,
They may be more talented than the Steelers.
Right. And so now.
Would you say that they are or not more talented on paper? Anybody agree or disagree with that? Like the killer B years, the prime of the
Right.
Steelers, is this team more
I
talented?
think it's more talented, yeah, on paper. I would agree with that statement. I mean, you have just
Which
at the
years?
running back
I'm
position.
saying the
Over
prime.
the last
Let's go
few years,
the
yeah.
last 4 or 5 years. With the
Well, I
Steelers.
think the Steelers' defense has always been, in the last 7 or 8 years, has been their weakness. I mean, they've won all their Super Bowls on the back of a good defense. In the last 7 or 8 years, it's been an offense-heavy team. So I think the defense is what has held them down. I think it's comparable, though, as far as when you talk about the offense, Steelers and Browns. OBJ and Baker can be special.
And that's where I come to, like, Freddie Kitchens, and I know I've said it with the Adam Gase, but I just feel like, man, football's more than just X's and O's. I mean, you got to manage your players. You know how to get the best out of them, but yet handle different situations that is going to go on, like AB and Le'Veon. And I personally felt, I was in that locker room. I felt like Mike Tomlin handled it well for a while. And then, it gets to a point it's tough, you know. And so I'm interested to see, and I'm excited to see how Freddie Kitchens does it. I mean, he seems like he'll do a good job. He's got that nice little Southern twang about him, and but it's going to be interesting if they don't, if they're not living up to expectations early, then how's that locker room?
Yeah, like, so when the first shit hits the fan there, and it's going to happen. It'll be, early in the year, whatever. At some point, they're going to lose a game, maybe lose 2 in a row, something. Who really is going to be the guy that sets it right? Is it Baker or is it Freddie in a locker room?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Baker right now. I mean,
He's a tone setter.
Yeah,
Baker's a tone
I
setter.
think
He always has
Baker.
been.
You see what he said, recently coming out. Like, if you don't want to be here, then we don't want guys that are here. So I think he is definitely the tone setter, and I think it has to come from your quarterback, and that helps the head coach do his job too. When the locker room's getting policed by your leaders, you want that, and I think it's going to be like that in Cleveland, but it's going to get to a point too though where you got some veterans like OBJ and Jarvis Landry that have been around, and you're listening to the younger kid, only a second-year guy in Baker, he's got to handle it the right way. So.
And I think all the OBJ stuff in New York was so overblown because you have this, kind of happens in sports. You have a bad team and somehow the best player gets blamed for it. When there was a million problems in New York and Odell Beckham's play on the football field was the least of the Giants' problems. So I think a lot of that was overblown.
Heavy lies the crown, so to speak.
Yes.
The expression is. So, Steve, you touched on it, though. Flipping to the Steelers, you said the Achilles heel, so to speak, has been their defense over the past few years. They did address that. Obviously, there was much to do about who they lost on offense this year. Antonio Brown, Le'Veon, obviously. They get Devin Bush from Michigan. Is he a day one starter, or is that just by virtue of competing against a guy like Vince Williams and Mark Barron for that position?
Yeah, he's a day one starter. Has to be. I mean, they've moved up 10 spots in the first round for him. They've been trying to, their defense started to get better right before Ryan Shazier got hurt, that terrible injury.
I know.
And that was the first. They've really struggled defending the middle of the field. They've struggled against the New England Patriots, who attacked the middle of the field, and you had a guy like Shazier patrolling the middle, so they're expecting that from Bush. It's high expectations. He'll improve upon, I think, what they had last year, but he's still a rookie. But I do think the defense has moved in the right direction over the last couple of years. It's been a while since they had James Harrison, Lamar Woodley, Palazzolo, and you actually feared the Steelers defense. It's been a while since that point. I think they're getting a little bit better.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, and I think the Steelers, are in the best position they've been in a while as far as the locker room's concerned, because I feel like, they've had that drama, whether, it's seeped in or not. You're dealing with a Le'Veon Bell contract holdout. You're dealing with, Antonio Brown stuff. So now that stuff's out of the locker room. Now it's focused on football and executing and coming together. I feel like the defense is getting better. Now it's offensively who steps up, because I like the signing with Dante Moncrief. Does that help Juju Smith? Juju Smith's a better receiver when he has a stud receiver beside him as well, I feel like. So, and I know I'm close with Deontay Johnson, the Toledo guy they drafted. I think Deontay Johnson has that quick twitch type that Antonio Brown did. I'm not trying to compare them as far as what he'll bring to the Steelers.
We've compared him. We've made the comparison. We did it before the draft.
But he does. He has that separation skill that Antonio Brown has. So now, Antonio Brown, though, worked harder than anyone I've ever been around. So he totally took advantage of what he was blessed with, his abilities. He took it to the next level. Can Deontay Johnson do that?
Well, and
How can you work that hard and be that big of a pain in the ass? That makes no sense.
You're high maintenance.
So you work that
married
hard.
yet?
He wasn't for 8 years, though. He was fine for 8 years.
Hell no.
I'm actually the high maintenance one in our relationship. So
let me ask this defensively real quick, because the Steelers almost look more built to stop the Ravens than to stop the Browns, if you will. So you have Hayward, Tuitt, Watt, Dupree, you get Devin Bush Jr., but then you look at the back end. Joe Hayden's getting older, right? And he's still going to be one of their guys. Steven Nelson comes over from Kansas City. We like him, right?
He's all right.
Nelson, he's all right.
Solid.
Sean Davis, Terrell Edmonds, the back end is not great at all. Can those guys stop Jarvis Landry and OBJ before you even get to Njoku and the rest of the guys?
I didn't say they were good back there. I'm just saying they're getting a little bit better. Hayden has played all right. I mean, getting Artie Burns, do you need a replacement, I think, for Artie? I think he's certainly struggled over the last couple of years. But Bush is coverage ability as a linebacker, I think, is going to be valuable. And his blitzing ability, Vince Williams isn't great in coverage, but he can blitz a little bit. So I think you're going to get back to, they're going to rely on pressure a little bit. TJ Watt has been one of their better edge rushers in a while. Bud Dupree's still below average in that respect, but they scheme it up, they get after you, and they can.
And that was
it's the blitz pressure that they're going to.
And that was the Steelers of the pass. I mean, I remember Dick LeBeau telling me. I mean, he's not blitzing 5 or 6 guys to get a free blitzer. He's trying to get all one-on-one matchups up front and trusting you can cover long enough because I trust up front here we're going to win a one-on-one matchup, whether it's the linebacker on the running back when he blitzes, or your defensive tackle versus their guard is going to win that one-on-one matchup. So I think you're right, Steve. I think they're going to trust on playing hard-nosed football and really pressuring teams and getting after them. And I just think it's a big year for Ben, though. I mean, he was down last year for us, right?
He was.
PFF
He just missed a lot of throws last year. Our system, I think, unlocks, here's some stats, here's a PFF grade, but the context behind it is important. He put up huge numbers in an okay grade because he just missed a ton of throws. He missed AB a lot. He made a lot of bad decisions. He had a lot of interception luck, but he's still a guy that can make a ton of plays. He had one of the highest percentage of positively graded throws as well. So he still has that in him. He still knows how to make plays, carry a team. He's just got to cut down on some of the mistakes that he made last year because he wasn't making those in the previous years. But, a missed throw here and there doesn't always show up in the stats. It didn't really last year. So he's still more than capable. He's a top 8 to 10 quarterback still in the NFL.
Is there any way within the PFF metrics and stuff, watching a young guy like Juju to say whether or not he could have success without AB next to him, is there any way that we can predict that with, some substantial number metric, anything that would be with confidence? Like, do you believe that he was good enough to be a number 1 right now?
I think it's tough to say because we can only grade what he's done, and we've graded him with AB on the field where he's done nice in contested situations and he's got, some 90+ yard touchdowns and he's made some big plays and all that stuff. But it is tough to duplicate the whole, all right, when you go into the week, he's the guy that we're going to stop first versus Antonio Brown is going to be the guy that we stop first. Does he need to produce like a number 1? If they are going to, give him more attention, can Ben spread the ball around a little bit more? I think that's going to be, the bigger question is who else emerges as a comparable piece. Juju doesn't have to be Antonio Brown, though. I think that's the key.
That's the best case scenario for Ben and the Steelers and for Juju is that Deontay Johnson emerges as like maybe a viable number 2 opposite of Juju. You saw they did everything they could to get AB open. They moved him all around the offense. Even the casual fan noticed that. So we are forgetting though what best case scenario is James Washington emerges from whatever slump that he hit his first year and becomes the guy that we thought he could have, or the guy that he graded at Oklahoma State, because he was the lowest graded wide receiver last year, and by all means necessary for him to have a better year for his career, but also for Ben and everybody else. So